Starlink is a satellite internet constellation operated by Starlink Services, LLC, a wholly owned subsidiary of American aerospace company SpaceX, providing coverage to over 100 countries and territories. It also aims to provide global mobile broadband. SpaceX started launching Starlink satellites in 2019. As of September 2024, the constellation consists of over 7,000 mass-produced small satellites in low Earth orbit that communicate with designated ground transceivers. Nearly 12,000 satellites are planned to be deployed, with a possible later extension to 34,400. SpaceX announced reaching more than 1 million subscribers in December 2022 and 4 million subscribers in September 2024. The SpaceX Satellite Development Facility in Redmond, Washington, houses the Starlink research, development, manufacturing, and orbit control facilities. In May 2018, SpaceX estimated the total cost of designing, building, and deploying the constellation would be at least $10 billion. Revenues from Starlink in 2022 were reportedly $1.4 billion, accompanied by a net loss, with a small profit being reported that began only in 2023. Revenue is expected to reach $6.6 billion in 2024. Starlink has been extensively used in the Russo-Ukrainian War, a role for which it has been contracted by the United States Department of Defense. Starshield, a military version of Starlink, is designed for government use. Astronomers raise concerns about the effect the constellation may have on ground-based astronomy and how the satellites will contribute to an already congested orbital environment. SpaceX has attempted to mitigate astronometric interference concerns with measures to reduce the satellite's brightness during operation. The satellites are equipped with Hall-effect thrusters, allowing them to raise their orbit, station keep, and deorbit at the end of their lives. They are also designed to autonomously and smoothly avoid collisions based on uplinked tracking data. History background. Constellations of low Earth orbit satellites were first conceptualized in the mid-1980s as part of the Strategic Defense Initiative, culminating in Brilliant Pebbles, where weapons were to be staged in low orbits to intercept ballistic missiles at short notice. The potential for low-latency communication was also recognized, and development offshoots in the 1990s led to numerous commercial mega-constellations using around 100 satellites, such as Celestri, Teledesic, Iridium, and Globalstar. However, all entities entered bankruptcy by the dot-com bubble burst, due in part to excessive launch costs at the time. In 2004, Larry Williams, SpaceX VP of Strategic Relations and former VP of Teledesic's Internet in the Sky program, opened the SpaceX Washington, D.C. office. That June, SpaceX acquired a stake in Surrey Satellite Technology, SSTL, as part of a shared strategic vision. SSTL was at that time working to extend the Internet into space. However, SpaceX's stake was eventually sold back to EAD's Astrium in 2008 after the company became more focused on navigation and Earth observation. In early 2014, Elon Musk and Greg Weiler were working together planning a constellation of around 700 satellites called WorldView, which would be over 10 times the size of the then largest Iridium satellite constellation. However, these discussions broke down in June 2014, and SpaceX instead filed an International Telecommunications Union (ITU) application via the Norwegian Communications Authority under the name STEAM. SpaceX confirmed the connection in the 2016 application to license Starlink with the Federal Communications Commission, FCC. SpaceX trademarked the name Starlink in the United States for their satellite broadband network. The name was inspired by the 2012 novel The Fault in Our Stars. Starlink was publicly announced in January 2015 with the opening of the SpaceX Satellite Development Facility in Redmond, Washington. During the opening, Musk stated there is still significant unmet demand worldwide for low-cost broadband capabilities and that Starlink would target bandwidth to carry up to 50% of all backhaul communications traffic and up to 10% of local internet traffic in high-density cities. Musk further stated that the positive cash flow from selling satellite internet services would be necessary to fund their Mars plans. Furthermore, SpaceX has long-term plans to develop and deploy a version of the satellite communication system to serve Mars. Starting with 60 engineers, the company operated in 30,000 square feet of leased space, and by January 2017 had taken on a second 30,000 square feet facility, both in Redmond. In August 2018, SpaceX consolidated all their Seattle area operations with a move to a larger 3-building facility at Redmond Ridge Corporate Center to support satellite manufacturing in addition to research and development. In July 2016, SpaceX acquired an additional 8,000 square feet of creative space in Irvine, California, Orange County. The Irvine office would include signal processing, RFIC, and ASIC development for the satellite program. By October 2016, the satellite division was focusing on a significant business challenge of achieving a sufficiently low-cost design for the user equipment. SpaceX President Gwynne Shotwell said then that the project remained in the design phase as the company seeks to tackle issues related to user terminal cost. In November 2016, SpaceX filed an application with the FCC for a non-geostationary orbit (NGSO) satellite system in the fixed satellite service using the Q and K frequency bands. In September 2017, the FCC ruled that half of the constellation must be in orbit within 6 years to comply with licensing terms, while the full system should be in orbit within 9 years from the date of the license. SpaceX filed documents in late 2017 with the FCC to clarify their space debris mitigation plan, under which the company was to implement an operations plan for the orderly deorbit of satellites nearing the end of their useful lives, roughly 5 to 7 years, at a rate far faster than is required under international standards. Satellites will deorbit by propulsively moving to a disposal orbit from which they will re-enter the Earth's atmosphere within approximately 1 year after completion of their mission. In March 2018, the FCC granted SpaceX approval for the initial 4,425 satellites, with some conditions. SpaceX would need to obtain a separate approval from the ITU. The FCC supported a NASA request to ask SpaceX to achieve an even higher level of deorbiting reliability than the standard that NASA had previously used for itself, reliably deorbiting 90% of the satellites after their missions are complete. In May 2018, SpaceX expected the total cost of development and build-out of the constellation to approach $10 billion, equivalent to $11,950 million in 2023. In mid-2018, SpaceX reorganized the Satellite Development Division in Redmond and terminated several members of senior management. First launches, 2019-2020. After launching 2 test satellites in February 2018, the first batch of 60 operational Starlink satellites were launched in May 2019. By late 2019, SpaceX was transitioning their satellite efforts from research and development to manufacturing, with the planned first launch of a large group of satellites to orbit and the clear need to achieve an average launch rate of 44 high-performance, low-cost spacecraft built and launched every month for the next 60 months to get the 2,200 satellites launched to support their FCC spectrum allocation license assignment. SpaceX said they will meet the deadline of having half the constellation in orbit within 6 years of authorization, and the full system in 9 years. By July of 2020, Starlink's limited beta internet service was open to invitees from the public. Invitees had to sign non-disclosure agreements and were only charged $2 per month to test out billing services. In October 2020, a wider public beta was launched where beta testers were charged the full monthly cost and could speak freely about their experience. Starlink beta testers reported speeds over 150 Mbps, above the range announced for the public beta test. Commercial service, 2021 present. The FCC had earlier awarded SpaceX with $885.5 million worth of federal subsidies to support rural broadband customers in 35 U.S. states through Starlink. But the $885.5 million aid package was revoked in August 2022, with the FCC stating that Starlink failed to demonstrate its ability to deliver the promised service. SpaceX later appealed the decision, saying they met or surpassed all RDOF deployment requirements that existed during bidding, and that the FCC created new standards that no bidder could meet today. In December 2023, after the second failed test launch of Starship, the FCC formally denied SpaceX's appeal since Starlink had not shown that it was reasonably capable of fulfilling RDOF's requirements to deploy a network of the scope, scale, and size required to win the subsidy. In March 2021, SpaceX submitted an application to the FCC for mobile variations of their terminal designed for vehicles, vessels, and aircraft, and later in June, the company applied to the FCC to use mobile Starlink transceivers on launch vehicles flying to Earth orbit, after having previously tested high-altitude, low-velocity mobile use on a rocket prototype in May 2021. In 2022, SpaceX announced the Starlink Business Service Tier, a higher-performance version of the service. It provides a larger high-performance antenna and listed speeds of between 150 and 500 Mbps, with a cost of $2,500 for the antenna and a $500 monthly service fee. The service includes 24/7 prioritized support. Deliveries are advertised to begin in the second quarter of 2022. The FCC also approved the licensing of Starlink services to boats, aircraft, and moving vehicles. Starlink terminal production being delayed by the 2020-2023 global chip shortage led to only 5,000 subscribers for the last 2 months of 2021, but this was soon resolved. On December 1, 2022, the FCC issued an approval for SpaceX to launch the initial 7,500 satellites for its second-generation Gen 2 constellation in 3 low Earth orbit orbital shells at 525, 530, and 535 kilometers, 326, 329, and 332 miles altitude. Overall, SpaceX had requested approval for as many as 29,988 Gen 2 satellites, with approximately 10,000 in the 525 to 535 kilometer, 326 to 332 mile altitude shells, plus about 20,000 in 340 to 360 kilometer, 210 to 220 mile shells, and nearly 500 in 604 to 614 kilometer, 375 to 382 mile shells. However, the FCC noted that this is not a net increase in approved on-orbit satellites for SpaceX, since SpaceX is no longer planning to deploy 7,518 V-band satellites at 340 kilometer, 210 mile altitude that had previously been authorized. In March 2023, the company reported that they were manufacturing 6 Starlink V2 mini satellites per day, as well as thousands of user terminals. The V2 Mini has Gen 2 Starlink satellite features while being assembled in a smaller form factor than the larger Gen 2 satellites. The Gen 2 satellites require the 9-meter, 29.5-foot diameter Starship in order to launch them. The Starlink business unit had a single cash flow positive quarter during 2022 and is expecting to be profitable in 2023. In May 2018, SpaceX estimated the total cost of designing, building, and deploying the constellation would be at least $10 billion. In January 2017, SpaceX expected annual revenue from Starlink to reach $12 billion by 2022 and exceed $30 billion by 2025. Starlink was at an annual loss in 2021. Revenues from Starlink in 2022 were reportedly $1.4 billion, accompanied by a net loss, with a small profit being reported by Musk starting in 2023. Tensions between Brazil and Elon Musk's business ventures escalated in 2024 as the country's telecom regulator Anatel threatened to sanction Starlink after Brazil's top court upheld a ban on X. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva supported the decision, citing X's role in spreading hate and misinformation, undermining Brazil's democracy. Judge Alexandra de Moraes had frozen Starlink's accounts, and Starlink refused to comply with an order to block domestic access to X until the freeze was lifted, risking its license to operate. Satellite Internet. Starlink provides satellite-based internet connectivity to underserved areas of the planet, as well as competitively priced service in more urbanized areas. In the United States, Starlink charged at launch a one-time hardware fee of $599 for a user terminal and $120 per month for internet service at a fixed service address location. An additional $25 per month allows the user terminal to move beyond a fixed location, Starlink for RVs, but with service speeds deprioritized compared to the fixed users in that area. Fixed users are told to expect typical throughput of 50 to 150 Mbps and latency from 20 to 40 Ms. A study found users averaged download speeds of 90.55 Mbps in the first quarter of 2022, but dropped to 62.5 Mbps in the second quarter. A higher performance version of the service advertises speeds of 150 to 500 Mbps, in exchange for a more costly $2,500 user terminal and a $500 monthly service fee. Another service called Starlink Maritime became available in July 2022, providing internet access on the open ocean, with speeds of 350 MB class, requiring purchase of a maritime-grade $10,000 user terminal and a $5,000 monthly service fee. Sales are capped to a few hundred fixed users per 20-kilometer, 10-mile service cell area due to limited wireless capacity. Starlink alternatively offers a best-effort service tier, allowing homes in capped areas to receive the current unused bandwidth of their cell while they are on the waiting list for more prioritized service. The price and equipment are the same as the residential service at $110 per month. To improve the service quality in densely populated areas, Starlink introduced a monthly 1 terabyte data cap for all non-business users, which became enforced in 2023. In August 2022, SpaceX lowered monthly service costs for users in select countries. For example, users in Brazil and Chile saw monthly fee decreases of about 50%. According to internet analysis company Ookla, Starlink speeds degraded during the first half of 2022 as more customers signed up for the service. SpaceX has said that Starlink speeds will improve as more satellites are deployed. In September 2023, satellite operator SES announced a satellite internet service for cruise lines using both the Starlink satellites in low Earth orbit, LEO, and SES-owned O3b mPOWER satellite constellation in medium Earth orbit, MEO. Integrated, sold, and delivered by SES, the SES Cruise mPOWERed plus Starlink service claims to combine the best features of LEO and MEO orbits to provide high-speed, secure connectivity at up to 3 Gbps per ship to cruise ships anywhere in the world. In February 2024, SES announced that Virgin Voyages will be the first cruise line to deploy the service. Satellite cellular service. For future service, T-Mobile US and SpaceX are partnering to add satellite cellular service capability to Starlink satellites. Also known as Starlink Direct-to-Cell, the service will provide dead zone cell phone coverage across the US using the existing mid-band PCS spectrum owned by T-Mobile. Cell coverage will begin with text messaging and expand to include voice and limited data services later, with testing to begin in 2024. T-Mobile plans to connect to Starlink satellites via existing 4G LTE mobile devices, unlike previous generations of satellite phones, which used specialized radios, modems, and antennas to connect to satellites in higher orbits. Bandwidth will be limited to 2 to 4 megabits per second total, split across a very large cell coverage area, which would be limited to thousands of voice calls or millions of text messages simultaneously in a coverage area. The size of a single coverage cell has not yet been publicly released. In March 2023, SpaceX confirmed that they remained on track to begin testing the service in 2023. However, the first 6 satellites did not launch until January 2, 2024. Rogers Communications in April 2023 signed an agreement with SpaceX for using Starlink for satellite-to-phone services in Canada. Also in April 2023, 1NZ, formerly Vodafone New Zealand, announced that they would be partnering with SpaceX's Starlink to provide 100% mobile network coverage over New Zealand. SMS text service is expected to begin in 2024, with voice and data functionality coming in 2025. In July 2023, Optus in Australia announced a similar partnership. On January 8, 2024, it was confirmed by SpaceX that they had successfully tested text messaging using the new direct-to-cell capability on T-Mobile's network. On May 16, 2024, entrepreneur Elon Musk visited Indonesia to oversee the launch of Starlink there. Musk met with ministers to discuss collaboration and the potential impact on Indonesia's connectivity. The event marked a milestone in global internet access initiatives. On May 19, Musk and SpaceX, together with Indonesian Health Minister Budi Gunadi Sadikin, launched Starlink for the nation's health sector, aiming to improve access in remote parts of the sprawling archipelago. Military applications. SpaceX also designs, builds, and launches customized military satellites based on variants of the Starlink satellite bus, with the largest publicly known customer being the Space Development Agency, or SDA. SDA accelerates development of missile defense capabilities primarily via observation platforms, using industry-procured low-cost, low-Earth orbit satellite platforms. In October 2020, SDA awarded SpaceX an initial $150 million dual-use contract to develop 4 satellites to detect and track ballistic and hypersonic missiles. The first batch of satellites were originally scheduled to launch September 2022 to form part of the Tracking Layer Tranche 0 of the Space Force's National Defense Space Architecture, or NDSA, a network of satellites performing various roles including missile tracking. The launch schedule slipped multiple times but eventually launched in April 2023. In 2020, SpaceX hired retired 4-star General Terrence J. O'Shaughnessy, who according to some sources is associated with Starlink's military satellite development, and according to one source is listed as a Chief Operating Officer at SpaceX. While still in active duty, O'Shaughnessy advocated before the United States Senate Committee on Armed Services for a layered capability with lethal follow-on that incorporates machine learning and artificial intelligence to gather and act upon sensor data quickly. SpaceX was not awarded a contract for the larger Tranche 1, with awards going to York Space Systems, Lockheed Martin Space, and Northrop Grumman Space Systems. Starshield. In December 2022, SpaceX announced Starshield, a separate Starlink service designed for government entities and military agencies. Starshield enables the Department of Defense to own or lease Starshield satellites for partners and allies. Cybernews remarked that Starshield was first announced in late 2022, when Starlink's presence in Ukraine showed the importance it can have in modern warfare. While Starlink had not been adapted for military use, Starshield has the usual requirements for mobile military systems like encryption and anti-jam capabilities. Elon Musk stated that Starlink needs to be a civilian network, not a participant to combat. Starshield will be owned by the US government and controlled by the Department of Defense Space Force. This is the right order of things. Designed to meet diverse mission requirements, Starshield satellites are advertised as capable of integrating a wide variety of payloads, offering unique versatility to users. Starshield satellites will be compatible with and interconnect to the existing commercial Starlink satellites via optical inter-satellite links. In January 2022, SpaceX deployed 4 national security satellites for the US government on their Transporter-3 rideshare mission. In the same year, they launched another group of 4 US satellites with a single on-orbit spare Globalstar FM-15 satellite in June. In September 2023, the Starshield program received its first contract from the US Space Force to provide customized satellite communications for the military. This is under the Space Force's new Proliferated Low Earth Orbit program for LEO satellites, where Space Force will allocate up to $900 million worth of contracts over the next 10 years. Although 16 vendors are competing for awards, the SpaceX contract is the only one to have been issued to date. The 1-year Starshield contract was awarded on September 1st, 2023. The contract is expected to support 54 mission partners across the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard. Military communications. In 2019, tests by the United States Air Force Research Laboratory, or AFRL, demonstrated a 610 megabit per second data link through Starlink to a Beechcraft C-12 Huron aircraft in flight. Additionally, in late 2019, the United States Air Force successfully tested a connection with Starlink on an AC-130 gunship. In 2020, the Air Force used Starlink in support of its Advanced Battlefield Management System during a live-fire exercise. They demonstrated Starlink connected to a variety of air and terrestrial assets, including the Boeing KC-135 Stratotanker. Expert on battlefield communications, Thomas Wellington, has argued that Starlink signals, because they use narrow-focused beams, are less vulnerable to interference and jamming by the enemy in wartime than satellites flying in higher orbits. In May 2022, Chinese military researchers published an article in a peer-reviewed journal describing a strategy for destroying the Starlink constellation if they threaten national security. The researchers specifically highlight concerns with reported Starlink military capabilities. Musk has declared Starlink is meant for peaceful use and has suggested Starlink could enforce peace by taking strategic initiative. Russian officials, including the head of Russia's space agency Dmitry Rogozin, have warned Elon Musk and criticized Starlink, including warning that Starlink could become a legitimate military target in the future. Russo-Ukrainian War. Starlink was activated during the Russian invasion of Ukraine after a request from the Ukrainian government. Ukraine's military and government rapidly became dependent on Starlink to maintain internet access. Starlink is used by Ukraine for communication, such as keeping in touch with the outside world and keeping the energy infrastructure working. Israel-Hamas War. In October 2023, after the Israel-Hamas conflict broke out, users shared the hashtag #StarlinkForGaza on Elon Musk's social network X, formerly known as Twitter, demanding he activate Starlink in Gaza after internet service in the region was lost. Musk answered that Starlink connectivity would be provided for aid groups in Gaza. At the end of November, Musk said the Starlink service would only be provided for Gaza with the approval of the government of Israel. In 2022, the U.S. State Department and U.S. Treasury Department updated rules regarding export of technology to Iran, allowing Starlink to be exported to Iran in support of the Iranian protests against compulsory hijab, which had triggered extensive government censorship. Immediately afterwards, Starlink service was activated in Iran. In 2023, the Iranian government filed a complaint with the ITU against SpaceX for unauthorized Starlink operation in Iran. In October 2023 and March 2024, the ITU ruled in favor of Iran, dismissing a SpaceX assertion that it should not be expected to verify the location of every terminal connecting to its satellites. Iran claimed that SpaceX was capable of determining their user terminal locations by citing a tweet from Musk, saying there were 100 Starlink terminals operating within Iran. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumb up and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future content. See you in the next video.